Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining. This is the Hybrid Cloud Management X Technical User Group webinar presented by the HCMX Technical Group. And today we have two presenters, Arun Pai, who is the Technical Solution Architect, and Uma Maheshwari, the product owner, one of the product owners of HCMX. And today we have got a solid agenda. Let's quickly jump into the agenda and the introduction. Well, today we don't plan to show any roadmap items, but still I prefer to show some sneak peek about what's coming or what we are planning for the next release at a very high level. Maybe during the end of the session, I can actually give you a short sneak peek presentation. So today's agenda is all about the design and deploy. And as you know, we have two major capabilities, design and deploy and cloud management platform FinOps. So in the design and deploy section, today we will be covering the service designer. Again, it's an existing capability and it's been a long time. We did not refresh the memory, as well as we want to give more insights into of course what's new we covered, but there are few stuff that we introduced in HCMX. Thought it will be a good idea to present the service designer concepts and a short demo, and the use case lab as a service, which actually uses the service designer technology and the offerings, and we are able to cater to our internal customer. So we will cover a lot of details when we get to this section, use case like lab as a service. And then there will be a short technical demo about throttling and scaling, which is also used as part of the lab as a service solution. And like I mentioned, I'll be covering at a high level the roadmap of 2023-05. So this HCM forum is for the technical folks, and of course the partners and customers also can join to get more benefits. And these are the two registration links, and you will get more updates when you log into this URL, where you will get access to the older videos and the information about the product capabilities and the technical awareness webinars that we did in the past. And we also have the community portal where several ideas can be logged, and the customers can actually share the feedback. At the same time, we have a dedicated community section for the employees where they can also share the ideas or feedback. So yeah, I'll be unmuting your lines towards the end of the session. Feel free to post your questions, and yeah, you don't need to wait until the end of the session. You can actually post as part of the Q&A section, and I'll be here to answer all of your queries. Well, I think I can skip the usual intro part. The HCMX value proposition, as we all know that HCMX is a cloud management platform which has a strong infrastructure automation capability, and now the FinOps and the compliance as part of it, right? So we covered this last time, so maybe I can skip all these introductory slides and then give more time for the presenters, Arun and Uma. So let me go to the, so with that, I will hand over the floor to Arun. Arun, please, you can start to share and then start with the presentation.
All right. Okay, sure, Alex. You can. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. So today I will be talking about the service design and the life cycle, which is service designer itself. So as Alex mentioned, right? So this is more like a refresher course. Refresher session, basically for all the service design and all the resource offerings, whatever we're using in HCM. So how they are in HCMX, and this will be a new value add for those who are new to the HCMX. But yeah, so those who are come from the HCM background, so it will be a refresher for them. Okay, so to talk about the main artifacts, which is respect to the service designer. So we have service design. So the service design is the main thing, right? So where you actually create your deployment plan, right? So we call it as a deployment blueprint as well. So the service design constitutes of multiple components, so which you can drag and drop on the designer, right? Which I will show, of course, in my demo. These are kind of logically linked and group together, and it will have all the links from parent to child and so, right? So all those links you can create and then create those dependency graph and everything between these components using the service design. So service design is kind of a high-level logical entity which binds all these components together. So the next important thing is the component itself, right? So component is like a logical unit which is representing a particular configuration type. So for example, maybe a server or maybe a software or maybe any other network component or storage component or any other resources, right? So that is represented as a component, and each of these component also is a CI item. So if you are using configuration management CMS, the Micro Focus CMS, so each of these CIs automatically integrates with the CMS, and then if you deploy the service design, so each of these CIs automatically get created in your CMS system, and all the property values are automatically transferred to the configuration item, and it gets updated. Right. So and also the CIs also will be created. The links will be created between the CIs, those relationships, as per how you have done in the service design using your dependency graph. So the other thing which also is part of component is resource offering, right? So the resource offering is a key thing, right? So resource offering provides you a way where you can bind your provider and your overflow into a single entity, right? So so you have provider, right? So provider is basically the resource provider which you create. So for example, your AWS or Azure or vCenter or any other third-party providers, right? So you can create, so that will be a provider. And then you have some overflows which actually does some action on these providers, right? So those actions, if you want to bind those overflows which you have to bind to a particular resource provider, that is done through resource offering. And each of these resource offering and the component both has something called lifecycle. So the lifecycle is basically the whole the stages, different stages, right? So what the component goes through in the whole deployment model of your service design, right? So the three life cycles, the primary three life cycles, which is provisioning, operational, and deprovisioning. So these are the main life cycles which is there as part of the life cycle model. And then there are sub phases and stages, so which I'll talk about it in my next slide. But these are the three life cycles which are there, and that is available on the component as well as on the resource offering. But you can define the overflows, associate the overflows as actions against these lifecycle stages, right? So for example, in the provisioning, you can add all the overflows which are related to your provisioning of that particular resource, right? Same way deprovisioning, so you can add the flows which removes those resources, right? So you can attach these at the component level or at the resource offering level. But if you want to do at the component level, so there you will not get any provider binding. So that means it is independent of the provider, right? And also it cannot be like a reusable thing, right? So in the resource offering, so you will get the provider binding. So automatically the provider what you create the resource offering for will be resolved, and a provider will be picked for that particular resource offering based on various other factors. And then the overflow will be passed, in case if you have done the mapping, will be passed with all the provider information. The resource offering also has the same provisioning life cycles as the component. So we recommend you to use the resource offering since you always have the provider, and then the resource offerings also will become like a reusable entity which you can associate on the component, and reuse it in many other components as well. Okay, so and I will show a detailed demo of how do you do those in my service designer demo. So next, I want to talk about the lifecycle model, which I was briefly mentioning. So primarily, we have three lifecycle model on the component as well as on the resource offerings: provisioning, operational, and deprovisioning. So each of the provisioning and deprovisioning has something like initializing, reserving, and deploying stages. So these are the three different stages which goes through in each of these provisioning and deprovisioning cycles. In the provisioning, it goes initializing, reserving, and deploying, whereas in deprovisioning, it goes in the reverse order, which is undeploying, unreserving, and uninitializing, because it is doing the reverse of what you have done during the provisioning lifecycle. So other than that, provisioning and deprovisioning, so there is one more, which is the operational lifecycle, which is the day two of your deployment, right? So where you would modify a particular service or a particular component to make some changes. For example, if you have deployed a server and then you want to scale that server vertically, right? So you want to add more CPU or memory into it. So you modify that particular component and then set the new server parameters and then modify the resource, right? So all those day two operations which you can do is in the operational lifecycle. And each of these lifecycle stages again has multiple phases, right? So one is before, during, after, and as well as on failure. Okay. So the before, each of these, like initializing will have the same 4 lifecycle phases. Reserving also will have the 4 lifecycle phases, right? So each of these phases are available across all these lifecycle stages. Okay. So the before is basically the actions where you add associate the overflows as actions on each of these phases, right? So the before actions basically gets executed before it processes the child components. Okay, so the before is the only action which actually gets executed in any of the order before the child components. The during and after are executed once all the during and after of the child components are executed, right? So for example, if you have a 3 structure component or 3 layer component, which I will again talk about in demo. So the child components are processed first on the during, and then the parent component, and then the parent of the parent, right? So the grandparent. So that component will get executed. So it's bottom-up approach. Only the before is the one which actually gets executed before the child ones. The on failure is the special action which gets executed in case if any failure happens in any of these phases. Then the on failure is basically for cleaning up any resources which you have created in case if there is a failure, and then you can execute and you can exit from that. So on failure is executed only in case of the failures. Yeah, so having said that, so I'll go through each of these initializing and provisioning in detail, right? So that I'll talk about in demo as also. So as I told, the initializing is the first stage, which in the provisioning stage, right? So initializing is where you would primarily initialize some of these components and whatever the validations you want to do or anything like that, right? So those actions you do in the initialization phase. The reservation is basically you want to check the resource provider quota, whether you have sufficient resources available on that. If not, then maybe you would have switched to the other resource provider, right? So anything like that, if you want to do, that you can do in the reservation phase, and where you mostly pick the valid resource provider from the pool of resource providers, right? So that you do it in reserving phase. And in deploying phase is where you actually do the deployment of your particular resource. right? Where you provision your compute or storage or network or whatever you want to do, right? So on that particular component, that is what you do in the provisioning stage. So these are the various stages which you use accordingly, and then make use of the lifecycle of that particular component. So similarly in the operational, so the modifying is where when executed is basically on the day two. So once the component is deployed, and then you want to modify few configurations on that particular component, and then the modify lifecycle gets executed. And in the deprovisioning, so as I was explaining, so it is on the reverse. So first the undeploying flow will get executed, and then you unreserve, and then you uninitialize anything what you have initialized, right? So this is the same sequence of phases it gets executed. So other than all these, right? So we also have user operations. So the user operations are in previously you would call as public actions, right? So these are the operations which you execute on the day two again. But these are the special actions which are available on that particular component. So you can define user operations on the component or on the resource offerings. So wherever you define, it gets collated and then shown against the component, which the end user can execute in the subscriber portal, right? Against that particular component. So for example, on a server, right? So you basically create your user operations like restart, start, stop, or maybe expand the disk or add more disks or anything like that, right? So which you can do. So the user operations that you would do using the public actions or the user operations. And in 2022.11, we also have added the ability to execute the user operations in the deployment operations through the operator persona in HCMX. And one last thing which you also have to know is the processing order of all these lifecycle and lifecycle actions. If you add those overflows, right? So what is the sequence it executed, which I will talk about in detail in my demo. That will be better one. But resource offerings and the component are clubbed together, and then those overflows gets executed in the same manner. So there is no differentiation. And the components in the leaf node gets executed. I told the bottom up approach, right? So the leaf node will get executed before the parent in the deploying and on the first two phases, right? So except for the before. And one last thing is if there are two sibling components, for example, if a parent has two child components, so then both are executed together. So if you have like two deploy actions, then both gets executed together. So in case if you have dependencies, then you have to set the processing order value, which again I'll show in the demo, to make sure the first one gets executed first and the second one later, right? So that if you have to do, and also I'll talk about the use case which you have to do it, right? So then you have to use the processing order on the component. Okay, so let me move on to the demo quickly, right? So I have the service designer here. So basically, if you go into the main menu, so the design is where you would get the service designer, the first tab. So you also have service components and resource offerings, the other two, which which we'll also talk about. The service designer is where you create your blueprint, right? So you would drag and drop all your components on the panel here, right? So already have a server group and a compute server here. So you drag and drop on all the components from the component palette, right? So and you can also create more palettes here. So you can switch the palette, and then you can see each of these component, and each of these component will list down all the component templates. So you drag and drop, and then once you add that component, so you can go and see the lifecycle. So you can add the lifecycle here in the lifecycle tab as well. Otherwise, you can associate the resource offering, right? So all your component are available as a service component in the service component tab. The CMS palette is the default palette which is available out of the box. So you can create your own palette. But each of these component are associated to a CI type. So you can see this label CI type, right? So each of these component are associated to equivalent configuration item in the CMS. And all the properties defined on these components are related to the CMS CI type as well, right? So if you update those component properties, so then automatically it gets reflected on the CI type. For example, on the Tomcat, so you can see the product type, the product name, and the vendor, and the version, and the application IP address, application port, right? So if you apply these, so this gets automatically updated onto the CI type in the CMS as well. Right. So now let's come to the resource offerings. So I have a number of resource offerings here in the resource offering UI here. So I'm picking one of them randomly, the AWS one. Right. So if I go to the lifecycle tab, this is where you can see the different stages. So by default, we only filter and show few of the relevant ones. So you can also click this button to show all the phases. For example, we hide the after phases. We only show the before and during and a few filters on the other phases. So if you want to see all the phases, so you can click this checkbox. And also we by default hide the initializing and reserving. So you can go ahead and uncheck or check all this so that you can see all the stages. And then this is how it looks like. So it is more detailed. So that's why we filter it by default. But you can see, right? So there is a reservation phase and deploying, modifying, and deploying. And I don't know whether I have not checked the initializing. So yeah, so you can see the initializing, reserving, and all those things, right? So this is all where you see so many phases, and then against each of these, you can go and add your actions. So you can browse the flow which you want, and then you can select the flow, and then you select that, and then you add that flow. And then let's say next, so you add some of the parameters what you need and everything, right? So you can map those parameters, uh, and then you if that parameter if you want to define as a input to the resource offering, so it automatically gets created as a property here. For example, if I select auto create mapping, right? So for example here it's resource binding ID, so it get automatically created as a property here, and then that it's mapped to the resource offering, and then eventually it will be passed to the overflow. Okay, so same way you can attach multiple actions against each of these phases. So and when the execution happens, so it will first execute all the initializing flows, and then goes to reserving flows, and then goes to the deploying, right? So once the deployment is complete, so it will come to the active, and then it's done. So then if you do the subscription modification, then any action in the modifying phase will be executed. And once you cancel the subscriptions, so then the undeploying flows will be executed. Okay. So other than that, you can also define the user operations. For example, here you can see a number of user operations, reboot and start and stop services. So each of these are again the overflows similar to that. So you can browse your flow and then attach the flow to that particular user operation. And then once the end user clicks on that, so the user operations, the overflow gets executed behind the scenes. So this is more about the life cycles and how you define. On the resource offering, so you can also see a provider tab. So this is what I was telling you. So basically on the resource offerings, you can bind your resource provider. So I don't have the AWS provider, that's why it's not showing anything. But if you have the provider defined, so you can attach one or more providers. So for example, let's say you have like 10 providers, but for this particular resource offerings, I only select like 2, right? So within those 2 filtered providers, so once the resource offering has to execute, so it will randomly pick one of them, or you will have more control. You can also define a lifecycle action where you can select your own provider based on some criteria, based on the pool or whatever it is, and then that filtration also you can do as a lifecycle action in one of these stages. And once you define that, you can come back to the design, and then you go to the you go to the resource offering area, and then you can attach that particular resource offering from this particular items, right? So I can go to the compute, and then let's say I select the resource offering here. And then once I select the resource offering, so this gets attached to that particular component, and then all the life cycles within that resource offerings are executed as part of the component deployment. And any other properties which you have to map, so that property for that particular resource offering, so you can map it here in the resource property mapping area, right? So you can just map them and then make sure all the properties are mapped correctly so that all the inputs are flown to the resource offering and to the overflow. And same way, all the properties from the overflow are copied back to the resource offering as well as to the component properties as well, so that you can use them and then pass it along to the other components or anything like that. Yeah. So one last use case I want to mention here is on a two-tier architecture, right? So where I was talking about the processing order, right? So where it will be useful. So for example here, right? So in this particular design, so you can see a server group has a database server as well as a compute server, and the database server has a deployment to deploy a Postgres database, and then there is a Tomcat which is deployed on the compute server. So if I just directly deploy this, right? So with just a processing order as same, so then what will happen is it's going to start the deployment of database server as well as the compute server, and then the Postgres database as well as the Apache Tomcat together, right? So it's not going to wait for um, each other, right? But whereas the Tomcat might need the database, right? So database has to be first deployed, and then you would need the Tomcat to be deployed so that you pass all the inputs from the your Postgres database as the input to the Tomcat, right? So if you have to do that, then what you do is basically you go and set the processing order. So since here in this case Postgres has to be deployed first, so I set the processing order as 1, whereas on my Tomcat, so I would set the processing order as 2, right? So then the Postgres database gets executed, and then the Tomcat. Since these two are leaf nodes, so actual differentiation happens here on the parent. So first database has to execute and then the compute. So that's why we have to set the processing order here as well as here so that it gets differentiated there. Yeah, so this is one of the demo design. So you can actually drag and drop any number of components and then create any multi-tier designs. For example, here I have one sample design for deploying a SAP applications. So this has like 3 servers and a lot of storage and network and database and JBoss servers, right? So it has three tier architecture plus some of the application servers, right? So you can have a number of parent nodes, so it need not associate to a single parent always. So for example, here this is one independent parent node, this another independent parent node. So you can have any number of parent node dangling, so there is no issue. And then you can create any number of levels and childs as you want, right? So there is no restrictions. So this will be your deployment model, and then you associate the flows, and then you deploy, and then that gets deployed. Yeah. So I think this is what a overview of the service designer. So hope you liked it, and over to you, Huma.
Hey, thanks a lot, Arun. And that design was literally looking like fireworks. Thanks a lot for showing the detailed design and deploy capability. And of course, this is one of the charming capability that we have, which gets us, top in the list, especially when it comes to the analyst review or the customers. So yeah, thanks again. And team, please feel free to go look into the older videos that we have already published, which also should give you a lot more details. And please post your questions in the questions panel. Over to you, Uma. Let me give you the access.
Yeah, sure, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Yep.
Let me know you are able to see my slides.
Yep, you're all set. Please continue.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. Let me talk about how HCMX provided a solution for our internal customer. So our customer is OpenText customer enablement team. So this team is having 4 pillars, and each pillar is having 4 department, and each department is owning their own individual AWS account. So this pillar and department
You're
is
sharing the opposite
Yeah,
screen.
yeah, you're
Switch
sharing
to
the other
slide.
screens. You can switch to the,
okay. Let me.
yes, you can swap here as
You're able to see the main
well.
screen.
Yeah, this is better. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Arun. Yeah, let me start with our customer overview. And our internal customer is OpenText customer enablement team. So the customer is having 4 pillars, and each pillar is having 4 departments. And each department is owning their individual AWS account. So this department is providing a solution to stakeholders such as sales, pre-sales, PS, support, and partners. So every month they are giving a training program, and it happens in a month more than 10 training programs they are conducting. And during the training program, they need to deploy around 100 to 500 AWS resources through this lab. Let me move on to the next slide. Yeah, the current process for this lab is all the student information are provided in an Excel sheet. So the trainer will be selecting the appropriate AWS account and the region, because as I mentioned, there are multiple AWS account. The trainer has to carefully select the right AWS account, and the trainer has to request a server for each student. So once the server is provisioned, the detail of the server will be updated in the Excel sheet, and it will be sent to each student. So along with the details, Gokomole link will be sent to the student. So here the pain point is it's a time consuming process for the trainer, and it is a tedious task by deploying a server. After deploying the server, getting back all the details and updating in the Excel sheet for each student, and he has to maintain a complete Excel sheet. So there are a lot of possibility of errors, because he has to select the correct AWS account, and he has to update the Excel sheet. And if there is any mistake in the AWS account, then cost governance and then cost optimization or managing the account is a problem. So they wanted a solution which should be a streamlined process for server provisioning, and they wanted an automated solution for updating the server details in Excel sheet, and they want to send out an email for each student. These are all automatic process. So they don't want any type of error to be occurred, so that they not able to identify what they have missed. So the solution was provided by HCMX using our features like service design. So here we created a generic service design which is suited for all the pillars and all the department. So they were able to create multiple offering for each pillar or each department. So as I mentioned, there are 4 pillars and 4 departments. So totally it comes around 16 providers. So all the 16 providers we were able to create in our HCMX resource provider. So with the selection of the resource provider, they were able to monitor how much resources has been utilized and what is the cost for each pillar and department. And we provided a scalability, because for each training, they need to subscribe more than hundreds of servers. So this was achieved using the server group component. As I mentioned, everything is end-to-end automated, because once the provisioning is done, then the collecting the details and updating the Excel sheet and sending out an email to each student, everything is done end-to-end automated. So the benefits that they realized because of HCMX is scalability and faster market reach. As I mentioned, it is a complete end-to-end automatic solution. So they were able to reach the market very quickly. And their training capacity has been drastically increased from 10 to 100. The second benefit is optimized resource usage and governance control. As you are aware, HCMX is providing a wonderful governance solution. So this automation has been taken, and it brought a governance control also to manage the provisioned AWS resources. And optimized resource usage and cost effective approaches were effectively handled. And the third benefit that they realized is efficient resource provisioning and cost management. As I mentioned, every month they are conducting more than 10 plus trainings. So approximately more than 5,000 resources are provisioned monthly, which crosses around 120K cloud spend per month. So HCMX FinOps also onboarded here to report, optimize, and operate the cost management. And the main benefit is enhanced user experience for the stakeholder. Provisioning and both the managing services are now automated, and they felt it is a user friendly, and it provides a great user experience because earlier they were following a manual method. And the consolidation of demo portal, because now everything comes under a single umbrella. So this provided the stakeholders to use a single platform for all their lab requirement. So with this, I want to show the production environment, how it looks like and what are the offerings they are creating. So this is a production environment where the customer is using. So here, if I go to the providers AWS, here you can see 16 providers because 4 pillars and 4 departments. So every department is having their own educational selection, and then pre-sales or PS or solutions. So every department is having 4 types. So totally 16 providers has been configured here. And then let me show the catalog how the offering has been created. So here are the 4 departments, and each department is having 4 types of pillars. One is education, pre-sales, and solutions. So let me show one offering. So as I mentioned, the trainer has to request a number of servers. So for example, if a particular training program is having 100 students means, so the server count can be added as 100. Then the trainer has to select the stack configuration. So here the trainer will be selecting the particular provider, because if it is an educational department or pre-sales department means, based on the department, the trainer will be selecting, and then in which region he wants to provision. Then based on the pillar name, the stack name prefix will be given here. So my pillar is here voltage. And here they are using a CloudFormation template. So the location of the CloudFormation template is provided here. And we have added a custom command because in future, if they want to add some more commands, that can be executed from here. And coming to the configuration, so for every student, and Guacamole link will be provided. So that link will be added here. And then an automation script, because once all the server is provisioned, the script will be triggered. And once the once the server is provisioned, the details about the server will be triggered by this script. So based on the connection protocol, if it is a Linux server or Windows server, here protocol will be selected. And as I mentioned, here pillar also will be selected. So which pillar is going to provision this offering. And jump host username and password will be given. So for the trainer, only these details will be exposed, because if they want to expose, they can expose this. But as of now, the trainer wants to give only the where the file is and total number of students, and then where the file is located. So the file name of the Excel sheet, and then what is a sheet name, and then where it is located. So this is how the trainer is going to see it in the service portal. So for my training purpose, I have 100 students, so I will be providing 100 server count. And then I will be passing the file name, and I will pass the worksheet name, and then the file path. So this is a current solution, and there is one more solution we have provided, how to attach. Instead of providing the file name here, you can add an attachment, because your file will be located in your laptop or any other places. So you can attach the file. Then once the file is attached, and we can use API to query the file and then process it. So this is about the end-to-end solution we have provided for the internal customer, and they are happy with this solution. And this drastically reduced their time from the manual deployment to the automated deployment. Here, once the service portal submit button is done, and everything goes automatic. Yeah, this is all about the lab as a service solution. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Uma. This was really extensive, and thanks a lot for showing from the production servers. Well, I just want to add a few more points here. So we are a multi-cloud customer. AWS is not the only cloud provider that we use. We use Azure and GCP, Oracle, and even Alibaba Cloud. So of course we are a multi-cloud. Just for this example, we have quoted AWS. And this is the internal customer, like as Uma mentioned. We can also code this to our customers to mention that we drink our own champagne. Of course, we can also call out the customer case studies, but we are using our own internal tools I'm sorry, we use our own tools for our internal use cases also. So that said, I want to give back the control to Arun Pai, who is going to demonstrate the throttling and the scaling part of this solution. Over to you, Arun.
Yep, thanks, Alex. Okay, so today I'll be talking about the throttling use case for the server deployments and how we handle that in HCMX. So the primary use case for this is what Uma just showed, right? So that our enablement team or any other customer, they can deploy a number of servers on the public cloud. And one of the restrictions what we see often in the public cloud is often imposed by your organization itself, right? So on public cloud, you can create any number of servers you want, but that is very costly, right? So it's going to cost you. So that's why usually organizations deploy some of these restrictions where you can only deploy only certain limited number of servers at a time. So they don't want to bombard with so many servers all in one go, right? So that is one thing. And also second thing is in HCMX, what will happen is if you just use the service design and then you request for, let's say, 100 servers, and immediately all those 100 servers are spawned, meaning as in when the processing is completed, right? So there is no throttling kind of a measuring in DND itself, right? So in the DND module. So because of that, what will happen is more than the limited allotted quota of the servers will be requested at a time. So for example, maybe in your organizations, if you set 10, right? So, but HCMX can go and request 20 at a time, right? So it may not be asking 100 in one go, but certainly there is a possibility of 20 at a time. And then that's when you run into some errors, which is kind of a rate exceed error, what you get from AWS or maybe any other public cloud. So where they will deny some requests saying it is exceeding the allotted rate of what you can execute or create the servers, right? So, and in the DND as such, there is no way to restrict that. So DND, it will go and create all those components as and when it can realize, and then it will start executing those overflows as and when the components can be provisioned, right? So there is no way to restrict that. So now how we can solve this problem in HCMX, right? So then the solution what we have come up is using the task fulfillment plan in the offering layer, right? So in HCMX, we have an offering layer where you can add some more actions at the fulfillment plan level, right? So what we have done is in the offering layer, so we attached a flow, and then that flow will actually scale that particular service design. So what we do is by default, we deploy the server with one server component or one server as the deployment model. And if the end user asks for, like, let's say 100, right? So then this external overflow, which is associated to the task plan, will actually modify that particular service and then scale that particular service to a certain threshold. For example, let's say you want to do 10 servers at a time, right? So it's going to scale each and every time up to the 10 servers. And then once that 10 server provisioning is complete, so it's going to again auto scale it to another 10, right? So 20 and then 30 and then 40 till it reaches the required server count, right? So this is just a simple external flow. So we already have previously showed some use cases where you can do auto scaling. So we are using the same auto scale flow, which actually modifies the subscription and then sets the new server count. So that overflow what we are using, and then we just wrapped around to just do a loop on that particular flow, and then and then we attach that in the fulfillment plan. With that, so it automatically scales, and then once the threshold is reached, so the whole service is deployed to the desired count in a proper throttled manner. So only thing will be if you want to do any post-processing actions. For example, let's say you want to send an email notification about all these 100 servers, or you want to notify the end user saying all the servers are provisioned or whatever it is, right? So that you can do on the post-processing action on server group, where you can check if the desired count is been reached. And then based on that, you can trigger those email notifications. If not, you can just move on, right? So that means every time it gets executed on the server group, but you can put a condition to not send the emails in the overflow, right? So that's all you need to do. That's the only change you have to do. So let me quickly show you the demo of that. Okay, so here I have a design. So this is a simple design. So I just deploy the server on the server group, and then whatever the server count you want, so it's going to deploy. So let me go and ask for let's say 25 servers for now, right? So I have that same throttling service, and then for now I'm asking 25, and then I want all of them as medium. So and then I submit, right? So now this will going to create a request, and then immediately it's going to create a deployment, and then you can see in a while that the deployment is going to deploy only one server to start with. It should come up. Yeah, it has come up now. So if you go to the events, yes, you can see it has cloned, and then it should create one server, right? So it is created one server by default, as I was mentioning. So, and I have set a threshold of five at a time. So once this deployment is complete, it's going to provision another 4 servers, and then after that 5 each till it reaches the 25. So I've done it. So on the offering layer, what I've done is if I go to the offering and then go to the task plan and in the fulfillment tab. So once in the fulfillment tab, you can see the create subscription lifecycle, right? So all the way to the end of that create subscription. So I attach my throttling overflow, right? So here I'm going to pass in the required details to my throttling server deployment flow. So this is just a business rule to execute a overflow, and I picked the overflow, and the inputs to that overflow are this. So I have to pass the subscription ID, and I have to pass what is my expected server count. The on behalf user is a general parameter that to that particular flow, so which I have passed in again here. And then what will be my throttling? So I can say 5 or maybe 10, or later whenever I want to change, I can increase or decrease based on my organization thresholds, right? So I can put that, and then I put the expected count here. So for example, here the expected count is 25, and that throttle count is 5. And then that's all I need. And then I pass in the subscription ID as well, so which I create. And then that flow will use the subscription ID and then modify that particular subscription, and then make sure it uses a throttle count and the expected server count, and then keep looping through, and then sets the whole execution, right? So now you can see that it should be active, and then if I in a while it should be deploying another 4 servers. So but since I don't have so much time, so I can show you my existing deployment which I had previously done. So I have deployed the same 25 servers earlier. So you can see all these 25 compute servers are deployed, and then if I go to the event, so you can see all the way from the bottom, so you can see that it has deployed. Yeah, so it has deployed, it has scaled, and it has deployed 5 VMs, and then again it will scale and then deploy the VMs, and then again it will scale and deploy the VMs, right? So every time it does a scale and then does the deployment a few times, right? So that's what it is expected. And in terms of overflow, let me quickly show you the overflow. So this overflow is executed from the OPB. agent, so which is an external call, right? So this is the business rule which actually does the overflow execution. So you can see that. So this is the current, right? They deployed one VM, and now you can see that an OPB task has been executed, which is that particular flow. And if I go inside, so you can see that it has now started to scale, and then all this scaling will happen. And then once it submits that scaling request, so it's going to scale another 4, and then like that it will keep throttling and then completes fulfillment. Yeah. So that's all what I wanted to show.
Yep. Thanks.
No questions.
Thanks
Then
a lot,
over to you,
Arun.
Alex. All right.
Yeah, thank you. I think you kind of covered almost all the core automation capabilities, like the task plan extension, where we don't restrict the customers to only do the automation within the service designer layer, but they can also extend it to now offering. They can add the automated task, as you rightly pointed out, the task plan with the overflow integrated. So
Right.
that's definitely a great addition actually after we converged into the HCMX. And yeah, thank you. And maybe let me take over to show the sneak peek of 2023-05 release. Okay, hope my screen is visible. Again, a quick regular disclaimer.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly run through the pain points. So if you look at one of the major issue or major challenge that we hear from our customers are to identify the owner of a particular account when any adverse event occurs. Like for example, an anomaly occurs, and the central team or the CCOA team or the compliance team or the PSEC team, should check who is the current owner of this account, or they may have to run around with multiple repositories, or even check with different teams, because if this is a dedicated account for a dedicated team, and if it is maintained in a common repository, then it is easy to get. But if it is used by multiple teams, well, there should be a way to identify which is the current owner of this particular account. So that is what we are trying to solve here by aggregating the accounts from AWS, subscription from Azure, and projects from GCP, and give the handle to the centralized or CCOA team who is managing these accounts to know the status of each of the account. The account status could be active, inactive, or suspended. So that's one thing. And for example, they can take an action if it is suspended, and they may want to check why it is suspended, or if it is active, should it need to continue to be active, or likewise for the inactiveness, right? So that is one thing, giving the status. At the same time, we also want to provide the primary owner and the secondary owner of the current, as per the current, records. So which will give them, direct access, so that they can reach out to the particular owner or the team whenever any real-time decision needs to be taken. As I mentioned, especially when it comes to the anomaly detection, it needs to be arrested. So that is one thing. Secondly, so we send the alert emails or the notification when any cost limit threshold exceeds, and that goes to all the account owners. But we want to also give the email, send the email to the respective account owners based on the updated information. So that's the short enhancement. Third, we also want to extend our insights, which are recommendations, to now give opportunity for the FinOps team or the CCOA team to get access to the AWS recommendations, where the AWS savings plan recommendation, so that the customers can actually use the data to go buy more savings plan. And as you know, we are not just only giving the number of savings plan that they need to buy, but they will also get access to the resources, right? Like the CPU resources or the memory resources, and which region they need to buy, and what type they need to buy, and what are the potential saving, right? So those are all the information that they can actually get access to, and they should be able to download and share it with the respective cloud vendor, and then negotiate to get the savings plan. And then on the design and deploy side, we are introducing dev to prod concept for the aggregated offerings, the HCMX offering, so that when the customer create an offering in the dev tenant with all the task plan enhancement like Arun showed, where they can add number of automation tasks, or if they have customized the approval workflow, or if they've added a number of policies or the rules as part of the offering, they can simply export and import in the production, so they can just quickly save a lot of time and focus the time to do other productive tasks. And the last one is to give approval process for the data operations as well. Well, this is a parity feature. Those who are already aware of the CSA HCM, where we provide approval mechanism for the data operations. For example, if they want to stop a production system, well, that needs to go through the approval process. And if they want to add any additional network or resources which requires, again, any start or stop, that also needs to go through approval process, or even adding additional CPU memory if they are part of the user operations, right? So that's the key set of features that we are planning to introduce in order to solve the customer pain points. So in the next user group meeting, we will be demonstrating all these capabilities as part of the technical awareness webinar. So next session is going to be on April 20th as per the plan, where we will be showing the 2023 OFI. And these are all like, we plan to introduce a lot more capabilities, but these are all the highlights. So stay tuned for the information that we usually share or the community forum, and in the user group forum, and we'll be able to provide a lot more details. There are a couple of questions, and I don't know if we have time, but just maybe I can take one quick question to Arun. So the compute server component can have calls from validation checks before provisioning. When each iteration creates a number of servers, how can one trigger the validation on the compute server component? Arun, if you can answer now, please do so, or we can get back to the audience later.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the question. So can I have the calls to check when iteration? Oh, sorry, I think I didn't understand the question correctly.
Okay, maybe we can connect.
Probably I'll reach out to the to the person, and I'll connect with him.
Because we already passed the time, maybe we can connect back. Okay, great then. So thanks a lot, Arun and Uma, for the wonderful session today. We really got a refreshing course for the about the D&D, and we got also real-time example, or not example, actually it's a real-time case study within our own company, OpenText, and this is the cybersecurity organization which is using our solution in a more productive way for both design and deploy and the CMP FinOps. So thanks a lot for everyone joining this call, and have a great day and stay safe. And we have already posted the handouts you can download, and we will be posting the videos sooner or later once we generate the official link. Thank you.